respected chief guest, esteemed guests, dignitaries from the institute and from the government, and all friends and colleagues. A very good afternoon to one and all. It is with immense pleasure that I am standing here to introduce you to our report and discuss with you the latest findings of our report. In this journey, I would like to say that it has been a very wonderful experience. Whatever these respected sirs were speaking about, we did have some of that in our report itself, reflection of these insights in our reports. So together let us embark on this intellectual journey with curiosity, openness, fostering a positive change and innovation. So without wasting much of the time, let us go and move on to the report findings of the report. So, why is this report? First of all, we must understand that since the economic reforms of 1991, what we saw was that most of the policy on E&D was almost the same, even though strategies were different for some time. But in the recent times, the government of India, through its effort, along with the efforts of UN, through its SDG localization efforts, there have been a change in the perspective towards E&D. Today, since this is a state subject, today, in this E&D perspective, policy perspective, states are allowed to introduce new policies. In this perspective, then they are mostly in autonomous with the union government. Union government does not interfere in the states. While the national priorities get reflected through the flagship programs like Make in India, etc., what is being supposed from the state is these states are supposed to change their or articulate their policies according to the national flagship programs of the government of India. And today, as we all know, in this paradigm of competitive federalism, states are supposed to introduce new policies and programs for the development of their respective state. But for that, you require strong evidence. Even though in the recent time, new tools and technologies have been introduced in this respect, but still there is a lacking in its scope, regularity, and also its robustness. As I already just mentioned about it, much of the state level policies which are being introduced, maybe what has been said by him, etc., that is the 1 lakh enterprises schemes, etc., almost all the states have its own states and its own policies and programs. So, even then, I would suggest we need to have a fresh relook at these schemes. And in this direction, the mission of the ISED is to remain part of this endeavor. And in this case, ISED Small Enterprise Observatory and ISED Center for Monitoring Enterprise Development in the state have come together to put forward this report. So let us come to the major, what I would be discussing, the major discussion on the findings would be this. First of all, the major objective was to scope or situate the E&D constituency in the whole entrepreneurial scene. In particular, what we did was we tried to understand what is the E&D scene in India. Once after we did that, what we did, who are the major stakeholders who are involved and what are their stakes? The third one, what we did was we framed or analyzed the entrepreneurial effect and investment effect in the nation. And after that, what we did was we identified what were the drivers in the E&D actually in the ground. In addition to that, we also gave some signposts of how to, as I told earlier, some of the tools and techniques are not robust or are not so much regular. So we did offer some signposts for the state levels. So the first one, what is the entrepreneurial scene in the nation? That is what first we would like to discuss. See, the first measure I would like to introduce to you is the total early stage entrepreneurship report. It's a very globally accepted parameter which is even being conducted by the GEM methodology. What it actually is it just discusses the proportion of adult population who are supposed to managing or who are starting a new enterprise. If you look at that rate in India, you could see that that rate is actually on the rise. Even though that is on the rise, what we need to see from that, what type of industries are there, or what is the proportion of the entrepreneurial space which is being involved in it. In that front, what we as in ISED, this type of the ISED framework of analyzing the industries, how was the proportion of certain sections of the economy in the total entrepreneurial space. I'll just give a brief thing of what it is. In the bottom of the pyramid, you could see these micro enterprises coming up, and also these self-help group type of enterprises coming up. These are also enterprises which are in this respect, which have a social and also an economic social solidarity angle perspective involved in it. In the other space, you could see the Main Street companies, which are maybe the small, medium enterprises, along with the public or private limited companies, which are actually a better or having a huge capital base. In the top, you could see the startups like enterprises. In this framework, we have already articulated the whole entrepreneurial space. So, in this framework, how is the entrepreneurial space located in India? That is what we will be discussing next. In this, see, generally when we discuss about the entrepreneurial space, you could see that this is the latest thing which we found, that the number of SHGs, which is in the bottom of the pyramid, comes around 41, whereas the number of micro enterprises comes to around 40-45%. Number of small and medium enterprises is about just 6%. And also the number of startups, which is in the top of the pyramid, they are the companies which actually creates innovation, whereas they only amount to just 1%. So if you classify, if you just look at in the regular sense, you might not get a huge idea of how innovation is happening here. So if you look at the ISED pyramid, you could at least situate how it is. That is, those who are market innovators are just 1%, whereas those who come, like the micro entrepreneurs who are necessity-driven entrepreneurs, who are just, that amounts to almost 86% of the space. So that is how it is being situated. So this actually, what the Ramendran sir said also, he said about quantity and quality, etc. So when we speak about quality, those who provide quality inputs, it's not that micro enterprise does not put, but those who create this quality type of innovation, etc., would be those occupying that 1% space. That is the problem, or one of the issue with our entrepreneurial space. We would always like to have much more of those top spaces. Even though necessity-driven entrepreneurs are required, we would also like to have more startups or more market creators, rather than just self-employed or necessity-driven entrepreneurs. So, after I have discussed, just briefly given you what is the entrepreneurial scene, the next thing is who are the stakeholders who are involved in this and what are their stakes about. As we all know, the major stakeholders in this are in fact business corporations, government institutions, entrepreneurs, financial institutions, etc. There are a lot of stakeholders involved, but who are the major stakeholders, or what are the major stakes which are involved, or the major interests which are involved? That can be related to two functions. One is finance and the other one is promotion activities. So if you consider the finance, that is a very important element. Financial intermediaries comes to front. The second thing which would be important, or the second stake which would be, is about promotion activities, which would be combining these, as we have in the next point, we would see the number of NGOs which is operating, Number of cooperatives, they would be always giving organizational inputs to these institutes. In addition to that, you could see that NGOs, they would be giving much what we can say as managerial inputs to these institutions. In addition to that, legislatures, for example, in an economy there might be a huge opposition. What they would be is, they would be a very important corrective force in the economy. So a combined nature of how this program priming effort happens. In addition to that, as I told you about finance, how the financial intermediaries is reacting to the economy. That we have compiled into the credit vibrancy index. In the credit vibrancy, just imagine this. How much net energy is added by the financial intermediaries to the economy? That can be, in case of, you could see, as we told, a lot of micro enterprises coming up. And that would be, in fact, a reason that could be associated with the huge number of mudra loans which are given. Mudra loans. And also the National Rural Livelihood Mission. For example, Kudumbasri initiatives, all these self-help group gets these loans. So, how these three variables, in addition to that, the MSME loan ticket size, how these financial intermediaries provide energy to the economy. That can be important in shaping the overall entrepreneurial scene. If you, in our report, I just wanted to give a brief snapshot of how the credit vibrancy index in the nation and also the program priming index is there. So the lighter colors, you could see that it's just the kind of energy is low. As you come to the darker side, you could see that the energy added is actually being vibrated in the economy. So that is with the, I don't see, what we believe is, there is no point in ranking any, even though we used to rank, but there is no point in just ranking these states because all these states have different ecosystems. So simply ranking them would not be of much help. But in this you could get a just a minimum idea of how this is actually located. Even though I am not going in specific of each state, that's why I just wanted to show how it is. So first we talked about what is the entrepreneurial scene, then we talked about different stakeholders and their stakes. Now what we would like to see is about the entrepreneurial effect. What are the development effects of these activities? We know that there are different stakeholders, they have their interest, and what are the outcome of these? And that we would like to classify into two things, entrepreneurial effect and investment effect. How is that in this, what is the scene in the states? And as we all know, I would like to just have a simple brief about what we mean by agglomeration and different things. See, development is meaningless unless there is agglomeration or local economic development happening in the economy. I feel most of you might have heard about crowding in effect. For example, why I'm speaking about it, we have gone in depth of how the clusters or how businesses are formed. There are two ways to look at it. Whether you look at the aggregate scene. Till now I have only spoken about the aggregate scene. But what is needed is how we go to the specific, whether development is equally distributed, is it balanced or not. So for that we need to see about the agglomeration effects. And in the one thing with this is, agglomeration effect is, there might be first of all a national scene, after which in India itself, we just investigated what is the scene in India, whether industries are located more in industrialized states such as Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu, or whether it is equally distributed in Bihar or poor states. And then what we did was, we studied in the case of inside the state itself whether industries are located in certain leading centers. For example, in case of Kerala, whether most of the micro or small enterprises are located in Ernakulam or whether they are distributed equally. Whether such an agglomeration is there. That is what we investigated in this case. So that comes to the more specific. And the importance, one logical thing with this is, I will just come to other one. This is the national scene, as I have already told you. What is, now I'll just introduce you what is the development. As some of you might know, what is the entrepreneurship effect and investment effect. These are the two after effects of development that we already saw. What is the efforts, different stakeholders, they put in different type of energy, what is their output. Now, that can be in the shape of entrepreneurial effect and investment effect. How do you compute entrepreneurial effect? Micro enterprises, for that in the MSME constituency, micro enterprises occupies the bottom of the pyramid. They are necessity driven. What they do is they actually add to the employment base. In another way, in the second order effect, they add to the entrepreneurial or employment base. So they create an entrepreneurial effect in the economy. Whereas in the case of small and medium enterprises, what they do is they create an investment effect in the economy. So what is the state of those small and medium enterprises? We computed that into the investment effect. So when we look at the national case, as we all know, entrepreneurial effect occupies 80% in average. Investment just occupies 20% of the whole space in the entrepreneurial scene in the nation. This is how entrepreneurship effect and investment effect is distributed in the country itself. As I told you, these darker places are having more accumulation of entrepreneurial effect. And one thing which we got interested is in the Hindi heartland has a lot more entrepreneurial effect happening but if you compare the whole map itself, a lot of entrepreneurial activities happening in the heartland of India. Some of those states were considered very poor also, but the situation has improved. That is what he is saying. But if you consider the case of investment, that is not the case so. If you consider the case of investment, small and medium investment, that is actually not what we could see. In these heartland itself, investment is not happening as it is in case of entrepreneurial effect. And also I'll just give you some rank. It's not about ranking, just for your knowledge to know. It's written in our report also. The national ranking related to entrepreneurship effect. Some of the states which are on the top as of now is Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, UP, etc. has come to the top in entrepreneurial effect as of now. In case of investment effect today, it might be because of the huge investment project which is happening in Northeast and etc. Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, etc. has been on the rise in case of investment effect of late. And so now that we have seen the national scene, what it is related to the in a comparison of the state, how is these development effects distributed along the states? And you could see, let me say that first of all, that the coefficient of variation or the variation between the states in case of entrepreneurial effect, what we found was it was almost 11.83%. That is on average for a top state, and while you compare that with the least developed state, you could see that the variation in entrepreneurship effect is just 11%. Whereas when you come to the investment factor, what you could see is that the variation between the state almost amount to 47%. That is, the state with the maximum investment and that with the least one, there is a variation of almost 50% among them itself. So that is a matter of concern. That itself adds to the first point, the other issue. That is, it's more concentrated on some centers than the other. And now, in this case, we go specifically into each state. For example, in a state like Kerala, first of all, we would take a single single district with the highest concentration. And also we will compare it with a group of five districts inside the state itself. So how is it distributed? That is related to the location quotient, etc., which we would be saying in the report. Location quotient is a measure which is used to see how is it. If the value is less than 1, that means it's almost balanced. And if it is more than 1, in the case of balanced regional, that means it is much more regionally, these industries are much more balanced in their distribution. These in case of micro enterprises and also in case of small and medium enterprises, how are they located? And in almost you could see that in the entrepreneur. Let me just give you some idea of what are the findings specifically from this while you just go through it. First of all, both the entrepreneurship effect and investment effect are positively related but at a disproportionate rate. That is, investment effect has a higher value than the entrepreneurship effect itself in India. The second one is the location quotient of entrepreneurship